Hey mama, today I am talking all about protein and why it's the number one nutrient that I recommend to the new mothers that I work with. Protein's commonly overlooked being an essential nutrient, but of course it's one of our macronutrients, one of 3 macronutrients, the other 2 being carbs and fat. And all 3 macronutrients are essential, but I would make a case that protein is perhaps our most important macronutrient, or at least in this phase of life, in early motherhood, it's extremely important. I find once mothers are consuming enough high quality protein throughout the day and across their meals, that so much else in the diet falls into place. And I'll come back to why this is true in just a minute. Firstly, let's explore why protein is such a valuable nutrient for new mothers. While the mothers I support are all unique and have their own different story and journey, there are a few common themes and symptoms that I see. These include fatigue and exhaustion, burnout and overwhelm, menstrual cycle irregularities, PMS, weight balance challenges, mood issues, and food cravings. And protein is essential for all of these things. Now, if you're wondering what foods contain protein and what I mean by that, don't worry, I'm going to come back to this towards the end of the video, so just sit tight. Eating enough protein with each main meal and throughout the day is absolutely crucial for your energy levels, balancing your blood sugars, making your meals more satisfying, which means that you're fuller for longer. It reduces food cravings and snacking between meals. It helps with body composition, aka fat loss. It helps with physical recovery of tissues, which is especially important after pregnancy and birth. And it helps with skin, hair, nail health, and with balancing our hormones. Now, before I said that once a woman is eating enough high quality protein across the day and consistently, I find that so many other things in the diet and the health start to fall into place, which is why it's my number one nutrient for new mums. Let me explain why that's true. Firstly, high quality protein foods, and I'll get into these foods in just a minute, but these are the same foods that are also the most nutrient dense foods. So we're getting a major 2 birds 1 stone here. By eating high quality protein foods, we're also eating the most nutrient dense foods. And perhaps one of the other most important nutritional tenets that I think of for new mums is about making sure we're eating nutrient dense foods throughout the day and with our meals, because that helps us to meet our overall nutrient needs. Secondly, it's also to do with the highly satiating nature of protein. We feel full and satisfied after eating a protein-rich meal. And it has to do with the metabolic balancing actions of protein. This addresses hormone imbalances, blood sugar issues, excess food consumption, weight gain, and then even more downstream symptoms of those processes, things like PMS, cravings, fatigue, and mood imbalances. So what are these high quality protein foods that I keep referring to? Well, when I say high quality, I'm referring to 2 things. Firstly, I'm talking about the amino acid content of a protein food, and I'm talking about the bioavailability of the protein in that food. Amino acids are the building blocks that make up a protein. When we say protein, we're talking about long chains of these tiny little amino acids all combined together to make this large protein. When it comes to the amino acid content of a protein, we can classify proteins into 2 categories, complete or incomplete. Complete proteins contain all 9 of the essential amino acids that we need for optimal functioning, and they contain them in the right amounts that the body requires. Incomplete proteins, in contrast, they do contain the 9 essential amino acids, but they contain them in varying amounts. So they might contain a lot of some, but very low amounts of the other. And so it doesn't provide the body with the full suite in the amounts that needed. Then when I talk about bioavailability, that's a term that's used to refer to how easily accessible the nutrients in a food are for our body to break down, then absorb into the bloodstream, and then convert or utilize for the processes that it needs. The more easily our body is able to break down, absorb, and use the nutrients, the more bioavailable a food is considered. The harder it is for our body to break down, access, absorb the nutrients, the lower the bioavailability of a food. So your high quality protein foods are going to be your meat, your organs, your fish, your seafood, your dairy, and your eggs. So you can see that they are our animal foods, our animal sources of protein. These have the full complete amino acids and high bioavailability. So you might be wondering about plant sources of protein. And these can absolutely be included if you want. They are great for providing variety in terms of your meals and your foods across the day and the week. But from a purely nutritional perspective, these are the lower quality proteins. They don't contain the full suite of essential amino acids, and they're much less bioavailable, i.e. easier for us to absorb, or they are harder for us to absorb rather, than our animal sources of protein. So the best plant sources of protein include legumes, which are going to include the beans, lentils, chickpeas, peanuts, peas, all of those things. Our nuts and seeds, which would include things like hemp and chia as well. Our quinoa and soy and soy-based products. So our soy milks and our tofu and our tempeh. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, about protein, food sources, high quality, complete versus incomplete, I've written a whole blog post on this topic over on my website, and I'll leave the link for that below if you want to go and have a read. And if you're curious about how much protein you need, well, that's something I plan on talking about in a future video, but it's also included there in that blog post. So before we finish up, I want to leave you with one idea. It's this fascinating theory called the protein leverage hypothesis. It's a theory that asserts that the body has a dominant appetite for protein, which will lead us to continue to look for protein in the foods that we're eating if we don't satisfy that need. Now, it is just a hypothesis, but I find it very compelling, and it really does explain a lot of the behaviors that we see ourselves doing in our modern food environment, which is absolutely saturated with ultra processed foods. So foods that are completely removed from their original food source, are devoid of protein. Foods like pasta, crackers, desserts, cakes, cookies, lollies, confectionery, all of these things, they pretty much have zero protein, or if they do, it's added back in by the manufacturer for a marketing reason. This theory plays into the satiating nature of protein-rich foods, the problems with over-consuming nutrient-poor foods, and the problem with not eating enough protein in general, and the problems that can arise because of these things. The body will continue to search and search and search until it gets the protein it needs for its basic bodily functions. So, mama, before you reach for any fancy supplements or mother's multivitamins, please consider going back to basics and just getting on top of your protein intake.